Why They Won't Debate Us. R.E. Sargon Mythcon. Hey, it's Prince of Queens, and I was taking a look at Sargon's personal rundown of how his Mythcon debate went, and as I'm sure might have somewhat disappointed a few people that want as many fireworks as possible, it sounded like a bit of a non-debate. Hopefully there will be footage uploaded soon.
But yeah, with the debate with Carrier, it was really frustrating because he basically absconded and just repudiated social justice, the ideology of intersectional social justice, on the stage, going, well, I don't believe in any of this. And it's like, okay, well, why are we here?
This marks yet another instance of a pattern that I have been observing for a long while, where you find a person who at least says that they have officially pledged allegiance to the gods of intersectional feminism, social justice, and the left in general, and happens to be intelligent and reasonable, but when you try to have a conversation with them, it basically doesn't work. That being said, I don't think that we're ever going to get a good debate with the people Sargon describes when he says this.
It's always a pleasure to do these things, but the quest continues. One day we'll be able to sit down with someone who genuinely believes these things, and we can actually hammer it out.
If Sargon or anybody legitimately believes that someday we'll have a glorious debate with the magical unicorn of an intelligent intersectional feminist social justice advocate, I want to make it clear what I think always happens when anybody tries to have legitimate debates with potential true believers of quote-unquote social justice. Because I've been living with leftists my entire life growing up in hardcore far leftist Seattle and trying to engage with them critically and productively on a person-to-person basis nonstop for at least 5 years. And it never works. It's literally, and I do mean literally, impossible. You see, one of the things that people like Jonathan Haidt, Brett Weinstein, and Jordan Peterson have all talked about as professors is that people on university campuses who advocate for social justice are composed of two distinct populations. Simply put, there's the fanatics who feel personally slighted by the system, and then there's the enablers who go along with it, as a result of being supposedly well-meaning. Well, my anecdotal read of the situation is a bit less forgiving of the intersectionals, because I don't entirely think that these people are simply well-meaning. I think that for the most part, the enabler population has been bullied into going along with what the small few are asking for, and often they even go on to do their bidding for their own individual reasons. As for the small population of aggressive and vocal social justice warriors, I don't think that it's simply that they feel slighted either. I think social justice doesn't just mean hoping for promises that somebody told them that they could fulfill if they followed the ideology, but rather, I think that these people don't even want social justice at all, but rather, they want social revenge, and they don't know and or don't care that there is a difference. I say this because these people are mind-blowingly cruel almost constantly, and also because I kind of used to be one of them, certainly during high school in the 90s, when I was a popular gay guy that managed to socially bully a few straight guys that crossed me and turn most of the school against them, though I grew out of that mentality by the end of college. Regardless, when it comes to trying to have conversations with social justice proponents, we've seen what happens a handful of times in recent years, when a potential true believer naively comes unprepared to the dialogue. They lose the debate and lose dramatically.
After this, one last question, just to clarify. Yeah, it was, if I knew that a male member of staff was speculating about how I look naked, I would cause the sort of fuss that would make Charlotte Proudman look meek. If I heard a female colleague doing the same thing about Andrew in accounts, I'd probably laugh and I might even join it.
I imagine she probably felt that she was oppressed, that she is disadvantaged in life by being female, by being overweight, and maybe a few other things that she genuinely believed. Did it ever occur to her that being female is a privilege, legally and in terms of average quality of life statistically, and that being overweight as an otherwise healthy woman no older than her early 30s is not a sign of disadvantage? Probably not until after that debate. Truthfully, I imagine she simply was just a fairly unintelligent and massively foolish upper middle class white girl that felt that she was owed a little bit something more in life because mediocrity didn't open a lot of doors for her as an individual, even though it certainly had opened a lot of doors for her contemporaries like Lena Dunham and Lindy West, who also still claim to be oppressed, for the record. Unlike the guy Sargon debated last year, who is a fairly good-looking upper-middle-class white guy that was almost certainly bullied and or shamed into feeling the way that he does, this woman was likely a non-suspecting true believer if she was willing to have such a debate, and she probably entered into the conversation simply because she was essentially stupid. Though, maybe she's started to come around a bit after the international embarrassment of having her ass handed to her by Britain's most cuttingly honest gay guy. Who knows? But what I do know from personal experience is that there are numerous people who truly do believe that the world is unfair, usually for them as individuals, and that they deserve the different world that feminism, social justice, the left, and all things related offers them, or claims to offer them, but can never deliver. I talked to one this weekend, in fact, who has been all but stalking me on social media, obsessively commenting under almost every one of my videos, totaling hundreds and hundreds of comments at this point, who created an entire Twitter account with my name in the title initially, tweeting essentially exclusively about me for a week or two within making her account. I wasn't sure whether or not this person was for real, in the way that I was almost entirely convinced that they had to be getting paid to be purposefully obtuse in order to waste my time on social media, which I realize is a bit of a self-important thing to think, minus the fact that we know the Democratic Party pays for people to troll the internet. And even I worked one of those far leftist telephone fundraising jobs when I was 15, which is the exact age of this kid. Thus, I decided I needed to speak with them in a voice call, and it was pretty interesting. For one, she is definitely 15, and she really does seem to believe most of the general feminist nonsense about patriarchy, even though she doesn't really know anything about essentially anything aside from things that I happened to mention that she promptly Googled in order to essentially pretend that she knew about them and understood them. She didn't lie, but, doing a little Google search after you just heard something 30 seconds ago doesn't really give you the authority to speak about that issue. Granted, she has mental problems, which she talks about very openly on Twitter and in my comments. She claims to have depression and anxiety, though also claims to at least know a whole bunch about bipolar disorder for some mysterious reason. And when I was talking to her, it sounded like she was sniffling and maybe in tears for a decent portion of the conversation. Likely out of sheer nervousness, I'd guess. It was truthfully rather sad in the way that I had to wonder, what if this were my niece or little sister? She's being robbed of the ability to make herself happy with self-improvement, and instead chooses to pick fights that she's going to lose because intersectional feminist social justice promised her a happy life, just so long as it rules the world and everybody watches her favorite YouTuber, ContraPoints. Granted, I still am not positive whether or not she is being paid to argue with me, and maybe I'll never know, but the point definitely seems to remain. she does seem to truly believe that the world is unfair for women, at least at her tender age of 15, and that she can help make the world fair with an ideology. And she feels that she is having an impact by essentially stalking me on the internet. I like to think that maybe she'll grow out of it because she honestly seemed like maybe she's a nice enough kid that simply doesn't really have a lot of friends and has been led down the exact wrong path towards how to ease into one's painful teenage years. Though, if she continues down that path, she might find ways to victimize herself essentially on purpose, potentially adding on Tumblr genders and inventing new ways to feel oppressed and pick fights with people to maintain the dream that someday everything will be fair and she'll live happily as long as the oppressed become privileged with compensatory benefits or something. Stranger things have happened.
I think their concerns are legitimate. They're articulating ideas that have to do with race, ethnicity, power, privilege, and we're taking a look at them.
That's my problem, George. You keep doing these little hand movements or whatever. Come through.
People were criticizing you for using hand gestures.
Absolutely, they were. And
However, most likely, she'll grow into one of the enabler types, playing a two-faced game of being reasonable when she is around reasonable people, while simultaneously officially proclaiming allegiances to intersectional feminist social justice, and telling the warriors exactly what they want to hear when she's around them, as if nobody will notice that she's batting for two teams. You see, the enablers are weak people, ultimately. And more than anything, they simply want to be on any given winning team, because they certainly have no confidence that they'd do well in the competition itself in order to help ensure a victory for either side. Thus, when the enablers are around somebody reasonable and you bring up the heinous, destructive, and often physically violent overreach of the left, they very often essentially refuse to even have the conversation, act like they agree that it would be bad if and when these problems existed, but do their best to essentially claim that they've never encountered these problems.
The idea that, again, this idea that kind of like men everywhere feel like they can't talk anymore and everybody's walking on eggshells, and I don't know, maybe that's true in your offices. It's not true where I live, and
I am legitimately not sure if these people are always bold-faced lying, whether or not they believe their own lies, or maybe they simply live in positions of privilege where women like the one just speaking are treated kindly by the social justice bullies because she's a famous person that is female anyway, and thus she legitimately has no idea what other people actually go through when dealing with the social justice warriors. In her case, who knows? But I promise you all that after a lifetime of mixing with these people, there are countless enablers out there that act exactly like her, who know better than anybody just how vicious the people that they are claiming aren't vicious truly are, and they knowingly lie about it. So why do they do it? Why do they tell you that a snake pit isn't a snake pit and then immediately go back to the snake pit where they are surrounded by the most combative and vengeful snakes in the Western world, pretending that their behavior is acceptable and that reasonable behavior is a problem? Well, as I said at the beginning, I think that each of them has a distinct ulterior motive for wanting to play along with the lies of social injustice, be it for immediate personal gain with a media company because they were socially bullied into it and don't think that they can escape, or because they legitimately just feel like they are going to be on the right side of history, no matter how wrong this future history might be. Thus, they will actually take up offers to debate on occasion, but I think we'll find more and more that they aren't true believers at all in any substantial way. They are essentially just PR representatives that do their best to try to make a failing company look as good as possible, or to act like the company essentially isn't even the same company that we thought it was, because reasons. Now, let's think about the warriors a bit. The true believers, or rather, the ones that legitimately believe that social injustice is fair enough for them, for whatever personal reason, and they have no problem doing whatever it takes to achieve their political goals by any means necessary. These people lie constantly. They avoid debates, directly call for censorship, encourage violence, engage in violence themselves, and basically do every bad thing that you can possibly think of because, truthfully, I don't even think that these people see a particularly bright light at the end of the tunnel anyway. I think that they just want to make everybody that is at all prosperous suffer, at least a little bit. A great example would be somebody like Kat Black, who was just a vile monster that seemingly wanted to use her platform to make the world suffer as she has suffered. And she got away with it for a long while, bragging about private meetings with YouTube headquarters, while simultaneously personally doxing people very frequently and constantly spewing bigoted madness all over the place. Now, would Kat Black ever debate anybody formidable about intersectional feminist social justice? Never. Because, in her own words,
I have a shirt in my store that says problematic in all caps and floral lettering. The meaning behind the shirt is that regardless of how we'd all like to see ourselves, we all have the capacity to be problematic, and most of us are.
I've heard her say on numerous different occasions that she's not actually all that politically correct in real life, and that if you see her at the bar, she's quote-unquote problematic as hell. Though I forget the exact video. Still, of course, she has no problem making her living by saying such things like that Irish slavery wasn't all that bad, that people only cared about the Holocaust because Jews are white, that gay men frequently sexually assault women, and she even attacked at least one gay black celebrity that built something out of essentially nothing for the black gay community.
That this is something that is produced by a gay black man. And to be honest with you, the thing that gets me sometimes about RuPaul is I feel like he's anti-black as fuck. I feel like RuPaul, it's weird watching RuPaul, and this is gonna sound very strange, and I know some of y'all are going to feel some type of way about this and like leave me a message, leave me a letter, but I feel like RuPaul is almost a white man in blackface.
Funny, Kat. If somebody were to start talking about black people that are in the public eye that have a certain way of performing cultural characteristics, I think maybe they might mention you. And truthfully, I certainly have. But do I think you're racist because you put on a bit of ebonics in your videos while sounding a bit more like a valley girl in your live streams? Truthfully, I don't care about that. I care a lot more that your philosophical and political views are extremely racist, not to mention blatantly homophobic, the fact that you're probably an anti-Semite, and probably every other type of bigot if we boil it down, which again is why Kat would undoubtedly never debate anybody, and is almost certainly why her YouTube teacher's pet status was revoked, as they now are seemingly putting all their bets on the great white hope of intersectional feminism, ContraPoints. In a way, Kat Black herself might not even be a true believer, being that she has to have figured out that she's just a massive hypocrite that has capitalized in life by dishonestly and vengefully throwing other people under the bus. But she didn't think she cared at the time, of course, because her life as a black trans girl was really hard growing up. So really, you used to have people like Kat ready to bully, lie about people, and actually dox them practically weekly on her Facebook fan page. They might even still be up there, these doxes that she used to do. And you have Kat's enablers, like the woman who debated Jordan Peterson, claiming that she had never witnessed this type of awful behavior. Or Susan Wojcicki, who was willing to directly cut quarters for Kat, hoping that Kat would become famous. And each of these people basically act like they've never met people like Kat, or know how people like Kat behave, or something. And then you think about it for a while. and you realize that really nobody besides completely naive and or stupid people truly believe in this stuff. And the dream of intersectional feminist social justice, which is ultimately really just a rebranded dream of communism, probably died before Stalin came into power. Maybe with the death of Lenin, or maybe even before that. Once people realized that only fools actually believe in a utopia on Earth. And then logically, you have to just remember, when nobody believes in this stuff anymore, that just means that somebody with a whole lot of money and power is simply trying to sell the dream to the masses in order to keep their money and power. And they probably know perfectly well that it never ends up as a fair utopia, as when they tried it last century, it led to tens and tens of millions killed, starved, and essentially enslaved, all while Chairman Mao and Joseph Stalin lived in places like these. And who are the Chairman Maos and Stalins of our time? Who indeed? Who indeed? But you can rest assured, they'll never debate us.